You know what's wild about power? It's not that it corrupts people, we already know that. What's really fascinating is how power makes you believe that absolutely everything in this world has a price tag attached to it. Trump genuinely thought he could buy Greenland the exact same way he bought Manhattan real estate back in the day. One phone call, one massive offer, one signature on the dotted line, and boom, deal done. Except this time around, the seller wasn't interested. Denmark said no. Not maybe later, not let's sit down and negotiate, just a flat out ice cold rejection that echoed across the Atlantic Ocean like a slap that the entire world heard simultaneously. And that's precisely when things got really interesting. Because listen, this isn't just some story about an island covered in ice sheets. This is fundamentally about what happens when the old rules of the game suddenly stop working. When a superpower tries to flex muscles it's genuinely not sure it still has anymore. When colonial era thinking crashes headfirst into 21st century reality and shatters into a million pieces. Right now, while you're sitting here watching this, Greenland sits dead center in a geopolitical storm that most people don't even realize is brewing. We're talking about trillion-dollar mineral deposits locked underneath melting ice. Strategic military positioning that literally makes generals on 3 different continents lose sleep at night, and a population of just 57,000 people who overnight became the most important chess piece on the entire global board. August 2019. Trump canceled a state visit to Denmark because they wouldn't sell him an island. Just let that reality sink in for a moment. Picture this scenario. You're the leader of the free world. You've made billions in real estate deals. You've slapped your name on skyscrapers from New York all the way to Dubai. Everything in your entire life has been a transaction. Everything you've ever touched has had a specific number attached to it. So when your advisors sit you down and brief you about Greenland's strategic importance, your brain doesn't immediately think complex diplomatic negotiation. It thinks deal, it thinks purchase, it thinks transaction. The leak came through the Wall Street Journal first. Sources close to the president confirmed he'd been asking advisors repeatedly, why don't we just buy it? Not as a joke. Not as some kind of thought experiment, as an actual legitimate policy proposal that he wanted implemented. When the story broke publicly, the world's reaction split into 2 very distinct camps: those who laughed out loud thinking it was satire, and those who realized with growing horror that he was dead serious about this. Denmark's politicians were caught completely off guard. They had no prepared response. Greenland's Premier Kim Kielsen responded with a statement that was equal parts careful diplomacy and genuine disbelief. Greenland is not for sale, period. But Trump didn't back down even slightly. He doubled down hard. In tweets, in press conferences, in private conversations with allies, he kept pushing the idea relentlessly, because in his specific worldview, everything on this planet is negotiable if the price is right. Everything has its number. The backlash was immediate and absolutely global. European allies expressed deep concern, Greenlandic officials expressed genuine offense, and Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen used one single word that would end up defining this entire international fiasco: absurd. That's all she said. That's literally all she needed to say. In diplomatic terms, that's the equivalent of dropping the microphone and walking off stage. Trump's response was immediate and predictably petulant, like a child who didn't get his way. He canceled his scheduled state visit to Denmark, a trip that had been meticulously planned for months, that involved coordination between dozens of government agencies, that was specifically meant to strengthen the NATO alliance during turbulent times. He scrapped it all because someone dared to call his brilliant idea absurd. Now here's what makes Frederiksen's move absolutely brilliant from a strategic standpoint. She didn't apologize afterward. She didn't walk it back. She didn't try to smooth things over with diplomatic doublespeak. She stood firmly by her statement, and in doing so, she gave every small nation currently dealing with American pressure a complete masterclass in how to say no with dignity intact. But let's be completely real for a second here. Trump didn't want Greenland for the scenic glacier views or the northern lights. So what was he actually after? What was the real endgame? Underneath Greenland's ice sits a treasure worth more than most countries' entire gross domestic product. We're talking serious wealth here. Greenland holds an estimated 25% of the world's rare earth minerals: neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium. These are materials absolutely essential for everything from smartphones to electric vehicles to missile guidance systems that keep superpowers super. Climate change is melting that ice sheet faster than any predictive model ever anticipated, exposing mineral deposits that were locked away for literal millennia. Mining companies from China, Canada, Australia, and Europe are already aggressively positioning themselves. Greenland's government is currently fielding offers monthly from international corporations, but honestly, the resources are only part of the equation here. Greenland's geographic location is what really matters strategically. As Arctic ice continues melting at accelerating rates, entirely new shipping routes are opening up that didn't exist before. The Northwest Passage could potentially cut shipping time between Asia and Europe by 40%. Whoever controls Greenland essentially controls access to those economically vital routes. Russia knows this cold hard fact, China definitely knows this, and America absolutely knows this. The United States already maintains Thule Air Base in northern Greenland. It's one of the most strategically important military installations on the entire planet, a key node in America's ballistic missile early warning system that protects the homeland. But here's the thing. A military base is a privilege granted by treaty. It can be revoked. Ownership would mean permanent, irrevocable control. Trump's completely botched attempt to buy Greenland accomplished the exact opposite of its stated intention. Instead of securing American interests for the long term, it pushed Greenland to actively diversify its international partnerships. Since 2019, Greenland has significantly strengthened economic ties with China, increased cooperation with the European Union, and begun serious discussions about pursuing full independence from Denmark, those rare earth minerals America desperately wanted. Chinese companies are now the leading investors in Greenland's mining sector. That's not speculation, that's documented fact. This is the brutal irony of American strategy in the 21st century. The harder you push, the more you actually lose. Greenland didn't need to be strong-armed into an alliance. It needed to be respected as an equal partner. By treating Greenland like a commodity on the open market, Trump personally guaranteed that America would never get what it actually needed most: trust and access. And here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable to talk about, because this wasn't just Trump being Trump. This wasn't an isolated incident of one man's ego. This was a pattern that runs incredibly deep in American foreign policy, a pattern that desperately needs to be called exactly what it is. Let's be brutally honest about what this whole situation really was. Colonialism wearing an expensive suit and tie. The United States has a long, well-documented history of purchasing territory outright. Alaska from Russia in 1867 for $7.2 million. The Louisiana Purchase from France in 1803 for $15 million. The U.S. Virgin Islands from Denmark in 1917. Which, by the way, is probably exactly where Trump got the idea that Denmark casually sells islands when the price is right. Those deals worked because they happened in an era when imperial powers routinely traded land without ever asking the people actually living on it, when indigenous populations were considered obstacles to progress, not stakeholders in their own future. When sovereignty was something you could transfer with a signature on a piece of paper. Trump's catastrophic mistake wasn't the offer itself. It was assuming that the world still works that way, that we're still living in that era. Greenland's indigenous leaders were incredibly quick to point out the ugly historical parallel. Mute Borup Egede, who later became Greenland's premier, said in a powerful speech, "We are not a colony anymore. We are not for sale, and we will never be for sale." That word anymore is doing enormous work in that sentence, because Greenland was a Danish colony until 1953. That's not ancient history. Its people were subjected to forced assimilation policies well into the 1970s. Children were physically taken from their families and sent to Denmark for so-called civilizing. The deep trauma of colonization isn't some distant historical footnote there. It's living memory. It's grandparents telling stories to grandchildren. So when Trump casually proposed buying Greenland like it was a condo in Florida, he wasn't just making a diplomatic blunder. He was ripping open wounds that never fully healed in the first place. The moment Trump canceled his Denmark visit, phones started ringing off the hook in Beijing and Moscow. You better believe they noticed. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a carefully worded statement expressing respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all nations. That's diplomatic code for we just watched America completely alienate a key ally, and we're taking detailed notes for future reference. Within weeks, Chinese officials reached out directly to Greenland's government about major infrastructure investments. Belt and Road Initiative money started flowing into Arctic development projects. A Chinese mining company secured exclusive rights to a rare earth deposit in southern Greenland worth an estimated $1.5 billion. Russia, meanwhile, ramped up its Arctic military presence dramatically. New bases, expanded naval patrols, joint military exercises with China in waters uncomfortably close to NATO territory. And NATO itself fractured, visibly cracking. European members started openly questioning America's reliability as an alliance partner. If Washington would throw a diplomatic tantrum over one rejected real estate deal, how could they possibly trust American commitment to Article 5 mutual defense when it actually matters? The geopolitical landscape shifted fundamentally. America's entire Arctic strategy, which depended heavily on Nordic cooperation, was suddenly on extremely shaky ground. Greenland, once a reliable partner, started hedging its bets with multiple great powers simultaneously. The irony here is absolutely brutal. Trump's attempt to secure American interests in the Arctic ended up directly accelerating the exact strategic nightmare the Pentagon feared most: Chinese and Russian influence expanding in the region. This is precisely how empires lose ground in the modern era, not through dramatic military defeat, not through sudden economic collapse, but through arrogance, through assuming allies have nowhere else to go, through forgetting that in a genuinely multipolar world, there's always another option waiting. Let's zoom out for a second and see this situation for what it really represents: a complete case study in the death of unilateral power. For decades, America operated under one simple assumption: that its combination of overwhelming military might and economic leverage made it essentially untouchable, that allies would always fall in line because where else could they possibly go, that small nations would take whatever deal was offered because refusing a superpower was literally unthinkable. Greenland called that bluff directly, and in doing so it exposed a fundamental shift happening right now across the entire global order. Power is diffusing rapidly. The old hierarchies are cracking under pressure. Nations that used to have absolutely no choice now have multiple suitors competing for their attention. Thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. I really appreciate you being here. See you next time.